It's kind of a bummer Dodgers lost, huh?
One thing I guess we could talk about real quickly is
Yes.
no, it's not a bummer Dodgers lost. They're playing one of the best teams in baseball.
They did well. I
It's
mean,
one
2 out of 3, but
it's one game.
I still want them to win every
Can't
game.
don't it can't baseball's not like football.
Right.
Oh man, my feet hurt. No, I feel so differently than you, dude. I feel
About
like
what?
I feel uncomfortable with the Dodgers getting too strong. I just do. I feel like it's not good for baseball when a team gets too strong. It's actually not even that interesting to me. It's not that fun. I want teams to push back on the Dodgers,
Yeah.
and it's good for baseball because if some fans feel like, oh, we're not going to win the series at all, man, that it doesn't. Like I want teams to get better. I'm so disappointed in the Angels.
Yeah.
They beat the Astros today. That's good. They won one game out of three, but it's like,
I mean, I'm not like I don't want
oh
teams to get better, but I just like the Dodgers to win.
yeah, they're not winning much.
You know what I mean? I mean, I like it that they win. I'm a fan.
I don't
Son.
want them. I don't want them. I want them to be good. For me, their highest peak was like in 2016, 2017,
Mm-hmm.
where you had a lot of good teams and Dodgers were part of the mix.
I'm getting complaints
Complaints?
from students of yours.
They're not motivated.
Well, if your kids aren't motivated, it's because you're not motivating them.
I have a master's from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago.
I'm not saying you don't know your craft, okay? I'm just saying you don't know how to teach.
Hey there, welcome back to Pod and Deliver. Ruben, tonight we're looking at a film titled About a Teacher. This is a 2020 film, and it stars, I hope I pronounce it right, Dov Tiefenbach as Hanan, or Hanan, I should say. Hanan Harchol is not only the story about, but this is a teacher who also who also directed and wrote this film. So it's about his life. And so it takes you through the first 3 years of his teaching. And they tell you like statistics right in the beginning, like within the first 5 years, this is actually in 2012, 2013. I think it's still probably true today that 40% of teachers leave the profession. And so you see him go in. So the film takes you right in the beginning. He has a little dialogue with his father. And you could tell the father's like, come on, it's time for you to grow up. You're married. This is a real job. It's the first job. He's a musician. Now he's going to be a teacher teaching film at a school that's like a school of the arts. It does like half the day is math, science, so forth, and then the other half is arts, like film and music and all that. So he's teaching film class. So that being said, Ruben, I have to say right away before I forget, this is the film that I will show all new teachers. I will tell them, watch this film. This film was incredible because it really gives you the feel of what teachers go through. At first I thought it was like a documentary. It's the way it was shot. I'm like, is this a documentary? But no. There's actors and so forth. And that being said, I'm really drawn in because of the language. A lot of the rhetoric we use as teachers is being used in the film. I heard like DOK level 1, DOK level 2, professional development, PD. So you hear all this word. And actually, there's one scene where the star says, oh, what are they saying? Like he doesn't understand the language. It reminds me when I first started teaching, I didn't understand what was being said because all these acronyms and these words being thrown out there. So you see him go through each year, Ruben. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but I thought right away he's going to be gone because he is just a fish out of water, and he's getting a lot of information from a lot of different people. And he has this one teacher, eventually, I think, Miss Martinez, who basically takes him under her wing and just starts sharing some things like, hey, have your own structure. That's what you need, is some structure. And then once you have that, things start falling in place, and he does that. But that doesn't make him the greatest teacher yet. He's still learning. Every year you see him getting better and better. And you see the students, and I think he figures out, even talking to Miss Martinez, that hey, one of the big things is having these relationships with these kids. And then he starts doing that, starting to get to know who they are. And really, I want to say this, he starts to love them. And I think that makes the big difference in his teaching. And even the film talks about a little bit about, or goes through his personal life. And you know that, hey, teachers have personal lives and they're trying to get through that as well. And Ruben, I just I know I'm forgetting a lot because it just really hit me. I like the relationships that he had with the kids at the end because that was more towards the end, like his third year, he started feeling realizing that that's a big part of being successful.
Well, he realized it because at one point, remember that trying to remember the subject this particular teacher taught, but an effective teacher will say this, an
Mhm.
effective teacher that he observed and spoke to said a very wise thing to him. And she said, do you ever talk to your students? Do you,
Yes.
do you in particular, did you ask that kid who falls asleep in your class, what have you set him aside and asked him, why do you fall? Why are you falling asleep in my class?
Yeah.
And I want to emphasize that that's an ego killing question. A lot of times, I think teachers don't want to ask that, wouldn't even think to ask the question like that. It's because you have to put your ego on the chopping block. You have to be willing to put your heart on your neck out and say, why are you falling asleep in my class? Because the answer could be because you're boring. And right,
Yeah,
they
for
could say
sure.
that.
For sure.
They could say that. But you need to talk to your students. And so that's based on this man, this teacher, Mr. Harchol. I love this movie more than any movie. I've said this several times though, so
I know.
I'm gonna say this movie among other movies. I'll say that because we tend to be, we tend to have uh bias in terms of recency bias. Like I just saw it, so it's the best. I want to say it's the best film. I'm tempted to say that it's the best and most accurate movie about teaching that I've seen.
Yes.
But there's been a few, but I will say the idea of this guy, the way his performance, you're right, Dov Tiefenbach, I guess,
Yeah.
his performance felt real, like it was a real teacher.
Right.
It was not, I don't see acting in him. I can't give a better, right? I don't know if I can give a better
No.
compliment to an actor to say, I don't feel like you were acting.
Yeah.
It's so real. And it helps that the writer director is right there. So the actor, can observe,
Yeah.
this guy and study him. And I'm sure they had a couple of lunches. Uh, you're right when you say that I would like to show this to new teachers or teachers in general, because you watch this guy and you kind of sort of slap your forehead and go,
Hmm.
please don't do that. What are you doing? Here's a comment that he would make a few times. Please, there's a do now on the board. Do the do now, please, on the board. It's on the board.
Right.
Kids, who's putting this who's eating McDonald's in the room? And he repeats himself. So why are you repeating yourself? Say it once. If they're not following instructions, there's the consequence. But when you repeat yourself, you're showing you don't have control of your class. And I had mixed feelings about him because on one hand, how accurate is this movie in the sense that
Oh,
the
very accurate.
admin is sort of painted as the villain, but not really, because as you're watching it, this is very
Yes.
instructive. This is very revealing. I'm going to just say it. It's the most accurate portrayal of teaching we've shown on that.
100%, I agree.
We reviewed on this channel. Totally, because a lesser experienced teacher or director would just paint those admins as villains. But this director, who's also the teacher, it's based on his life, Mr. Harkle, directed this movie. How fascinating is that? Understood that the admin was right in their criticism. Ineffective. Oh, that must hit to the heart of this guy to get these ineffective observations from these admins. And she had incredible grace for him because she said, I need this here tonight by 5 or by 3. and he did not have it. But Miss, whatever the admin's name is, I look at the breakthrough I made with XYZ student. I want to say the admin was portrayed very accurately in the sense that they're not villains many times. They're just trying to get, the numbers in.
And they're being told from someone else too a lot of times.
Somebody else, they have a job too.
Yeah.
The other thing that I really appreciated is that same point related to that is the overwhelming paperwork that we have to deal with as teachers. And it's not just inspiring students. It's, did you get in the numbers? Did you get in the assessments by this such and such a time? This is the reality of teachers. There's also an issue around IEPs, and they talked about that. It's interesting because in the movie, it said, it's your responsibility to know who has IEPs. Actually, I don't know about how it is at your school, but at my last school, it was all about the SPED teachers' responsibility.
It is, but we have I mean, we tie it into it, but you're right. They're the ultimate responsibility, probably.
Which is wrong. I appreciated this school better because, you know what? It's a shared responsibility, and there's so much to talk about this. Finally, we have a movie that talks about group work. This is a real teacher, and these are real educators making this film. Group work, people, break them up. And he wasn't listening.
No.
Let me ask you a question, because obviously you recommend it, I recommend it. You are talking about you're recommending this to teachers. Do non-teachers like this movie? Do you think non-teachers would appreciate this?
The only reason why I would say they would is because it's done well. I'm actually surprised this gentleman hasn't done anything. I don't think he's done anything else besides this, because he's definitely talented. Although he does it, I mean, he teaches it. I mean, think about it. He teaches, but you have to also be good at. You have to be good at telling a story. And he told the story. I think people would be interested in seeing a teacher who looked like he was a fish out of water. He wanted to quit. And Ruben, I felt that way my first year. I wanted to quit. And for him to stick with it and move on, although he had other people helping him, here and there. So, so if you're asking, will other people like it? I think they'll see this like kind of like a Rocky story in a way, like seeing somebody who looks like he's out of it and he overcomes. I think people like that. And so I think people who aren't teachers would like that piece of it, that, hey, you have somebody who doesn't look like they're going to do it. They're not going to make it in this field. And then they make it because they really work hard. He worked hard to the point where he even kind of stops his family life in a way. Like, we can't have children. I have to get this job figured out before I could move on with other things in my life. So I'm not saying that's a good thing to do, but I'm saying that's real. And I think people could understand it. And no, so I think people besides teachers would like this. But I definitely gonna, I mentor teachers. I'm gonna have them ask them, I should say, to watch this every time I mentor a new teacher.
I think there's some real wisdom in making this. I would say making this guy a filmmaking teacher, but cinema teacher, but it's a true story. So they had no choice. But what's fascinating about that is on the outside, you would think, oh, you're teaching a class around filmmaking. That's just fun. That's easy. No, and somebody mentioned this in the film. It's not just the content. You have to organize your class. You have to be able to manage people, young people. That is not easy. We don't just manage content. And to underscore that point, one of the most effective teachers was a math teacher. So I think the young teacher that was recommended that he observed was a math teacher. And
yeah, she was.
Yes. And she was it was only her third year in. And at one point, so think about this before I mention what she says to him. How powerful is it that you have a teacher teaching film, giving them cameras? Oh, before I forget, there is a great quote. I believe his father tells him this. He says, the father's not a teacher. He was talking to his father over lunch, right? That was his father.
like like a lunches. Yeah.
few lunches. He's just listening to his son and trying to, mentor his own son. And he tells, and he's saying, Mr. Harkle is saying, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to reach these kids through my, and he mentions, I have these degrees. I have all this knowledge, but you and I know this. That doesn't mean anything. Again, because it's about managing people and so forth. But the father gives a really good piece of advice. And he says, just give them cameras and let them run about with those cameras. And I actually, his son goes, oh, I can't just do that. I don't. Actually, that's pretty good advice. You know who else said that? Stanley Kubrick said that.
Oh, wow.
When they asked Stanley Kubrick, what would you advise young people who want to get into filmmaking? What should they do? He didn't say go to film school. He didn't say write the best screenplay of all time. He said pick up a camera and get accustomed to working with a camera. And that's what Kubrick did to become Kubrick. And that's what his father was telling him. Let them pick up a camera. And he was resistant. Back to this teacher, she said to him, she gave him a couple of pieces of advice. And at one point, she tells him, you want your kids to be eager to come to class. And his response sarcastically was, eager to do math? Your kids are eager to do math? And her reply was, my students are eager to be good at something. And that might have been my favorite line in the movie, because all our students, all of them, are eager to be good at something. None of our students want F's and D's. They just don't know how to get there. Our job is to find it. And there are all kinds of strategies of getting there, many paths to the waterfall. Of course, you should break them up in small groups if it's a really difficult group you're dealing with. Of course, you should ask them questions. There's a lot of strategies, but remember, to your point, you have to like your kids. You can't look at them as the enemy. That's the starting point. And then there's ways to get there. I love that quote that was so silly. You have to, another wise, and I'll shut up. There's another point in this which depicts the wisdom of this film. You get a lot of voices coming at you, and you have to differentiate and figure out which works for you and say, well, that works for that person, but not for me. There's a quote that I've heard 1,000 times. You know why your classroom's not working out for you? You're smiling at them. You can't smile at your students till at least November. And that's absurd. I'm sure you've heard that quote.
I've heard that. It's silly.
I've heard that. And it's like, guess what? You can smile at your kids, at your students. You can appreciate what they're doing. Just know what you're doing. You have to be in control. You have to know, and you'll be effective.
Yeah, I mean, so good. I'm glad you shared those things, Ruben, because those are a lot of the things I felt. I'm with you 100%. I will say this, a really cool thing, and you're asking about if people outside teaching might like it. There is one scene I think that people will like, is that you see him struggle, and you're sharing some of the struggles. He in the beginning, he's not grouping. He's doing a lot more talking. He's trying to, because he even tells the math teacher, I have to explain it to them. She's like, okay, well, you can explain it to them, but then have them go and do, what they need to do. And by the end, you see them glued to him because there's a scene where the assistant principal comes in and she chews him out, which I would say in real life, you go, for me, and I've done this before, I've gone in real life with one assistant principal who chewed me out in front of some kids. I said, don't do that. Don't do that in front of my kids. You talk to me. You could chew me out, but in person, but and so, but he gives them an answer and why he doesn't chew them out, get angry at her in front of the kids, and like or not like, at least he explained it.
The principal chewed him out in front of the kids.
In front of the kids, and one of the kids said, "Why'd you let her do that?
Why'd you let her?" Right.
And I think that was a good question, because it was disrespectful, and I think they saw that. But he answered like, I'm not going to fight her because it's my job, and I understood that. I understood he saw that, hey, in his life, once his father spoke up like that against his boss and he lost his job and so forth. But yeah, I do feel like I like that the kid asked that question. It was such a real thing because that's happened to me in real life where a kid goes,
So,
"What?" Why did that
so
happen?
you have a group of students who appear to be perhaps more in an underserved area. So they don't have models. And you see this, so we probably haven't mentioned this. I don't think we mentioned this.
No.
The idea that these students um, ran with gangs, some of them. Some of them were dealing with children, had already had children and have to support at home. And so they don't have models of behavior. How can students perform what you want them to do if they've never seen it? And so part of your job, sometimes, depending on where you sign, where you're going, sometimes it's you modeling how to behave. And
Yeah.
because they've never seen it. So to your point, yes, he had to teach them that. And sometimes, you know what's, I think we've talked about this, and maybe we haven't in a while. One of the hardest things to do as a teacher is, especially for someone like me who feels like I've been influenced by people who talk about the clock is always ticking. So be mindful of how you spend your time in your class because these are students who need to catch up. A lot of times they're below grade level. So how are you spending your time? So for me, it's all about I'm here for the content. Let's not perform. Let's not sit down. Let's talk about what I eat for breakfast. But sometimes you need to stop the content and just talk to your students and say, look, we just saw a fight out there. Let's address the elephant in the room. Or the principal just, thank God this has never happened to me. I don't think, I have to think about this, but I don't think a principal has ever scolded me in front of my students. Definitely not. So I'm blessed. I've never had that. But let's say it happens. Let's talk about the principal who just walked in and berated me, like this teacher did. And then you stop the content. And sometimes when you do that, the students lock in and think this teacher has been vulnerable with me. And I appreciate that. But the
Oh,
temptation, right? That's
yeah,
important.
you're right. You're right.
The temptation, though, I want to put the yellow light up. The temptation is, well, let's do this every day. No, don't do this every day. Stop once in a while, every blue moon, and just stop the class. And you know what? Drop the content the rest of the day if you have to. If it's big enough of a thing. And let's just talk, everybody. And the students appreciate that because they know 99% of the time you're all business.
And I will mention something a little different to what you shared, but there is another opportunity where he's doing like a teaching moment again with the kids regarding if if something tough happens, what do you do? And so they didn't like the answer, and he didn't really even know how to respond to their comment because like he doesn't live in their area, and he goes, "Hey, if we run away from issues, we're gonna have trouble. If we run away from fights, we're gonna have trouble here." In our neighborhood. So we can't just run away. And he didn't know how to answer, which I like that about the film is that it didn't give you perfect answers because there isn't perfect answers sometimes. They are living in a tough area. And sometimes teachers don't understand it all because they don't live there. So you have to be honest and say, you know what? Okay, let's move on because I don't understand. And maybe let me think about this for a little bit. And I think that's great. I love that the kids at least got to a point in his career, which is like his third year, was this to be able to listen to him. Because in the first year, they were not listening to him. But by then they respected him. You know it when your kids respect you because they're just listening to every word he had to say, right? And he knew it, he had him. And that's a great feeling.
There's a very subtle thing, and I don't know. I noticed this as I watched this movie, because they went first year,
Yeah.
second year, third year. I noticed that his dress changed from the first to the second year. Did you notice that?
I did. I was thinking he looks different than the third
Yeah,
year. He looks
and
different.
he looked nicer. He wasn't in a suit,
No.
a tie. No, we've talked about. I think it was Henry Wong. Remember Henry Wong?
Yeah.
The first year teacher. His big thing was the tie. You have to have a coat and a tie every day. But I think that's a dated concept. I think that came out like 20 or 30 years ago.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think that, but what I think is you should dress in such a way that doesn't throw off your students. I don't think you should dress the way your students dress. So this is one of those things that's just going to be my opinion, and maybe people will disagree, and we've talked about that.
Yeah.
I don't think you should dress the way your students dress. Personally, I don't. But I would just suggest you dress like he started dressing in the second year. He started dressing a little bit more appropriate for his position because there's something about uniforms. There's a reason why people, wear uniforms in planes, why police wear uniforms. I'm not saying teachers should wear uniforms, but I think it says something to how you dress, where at least, here's my lesson and I'll shut up. I realized early on that I shouldn't dress in such a way where students notice me too much and comment, meaning I was a bad dresser in my early 20s. I would wear faded jeans and messed up shoes and I talked about this where students would just say, those are some whack shoes, and there's a loss of respect there. And I'm not trying to say,
Right.
I'm not trying to be an elitist, but I think there's some truth to that as to how you dress. So I just wanted to point that out because it was subtle, but I think the director put it in there for a reason.
Oh, I think so. I mean, he did things like that just to really make this film even so real, even more than it was. I will end with this regarding him as a teacher. I'll say this last thing, and I think it's good for all of us as teachers. You're in your 23rd year, 25th year, whatever it is. I'm in my 31st, 32nd year. Doesn't matter what year we're in, we're still learning, we're still growing. And he, at the end of the third year, he wasn't there yet. He was still having trouble, but he was way further than from the beginning, right? You saw the growth, but he wasn't perfect yet. And I love that they didn't show, oh, he's Mr. Stand and deliver now. He was just getting by, and not just getting by, but he was improved, but he was still learning. So I like that. Hey, you know what? We've spent so much time on this because we really enjoyed the film, and I'm glad that we both recommended to you, the audience. Please go ahead and subscribe to our channel. Thank you for being with us. Have yourself a wonderful day, and we'll talk to you soon on Pod and Deliver. Bye-bye.